Yeah, okay. Okay. Hi, everybody. So, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here. So, welcome. This is the 2022 Benson Memorial Lecture, which is an event that used to be on an annual basis, but has been on a little bit of a hiatus lately for obvious reasons. It's the first one we've had, I think, in 2 years, actually, so it's good to see folks back in person. This is, just let me say a word about the lecture itself before I introduce our speaker tonight. It is a lecture that honors Donald Benson, who was faculty in the ISU English department for many years. He came here in 1958, was chairman of the department for a number of years, and he taught until 1993. And Benson's interest was in the intersection between literature and technology and the environment. And so this lecture honors the work that he did as a teacher, as a researcher for the many years he was at Iowa State University, and it was a gift, an endowment by his family after his passing. And so this is kind of an important event in the annual Arts and Humanities schedule on campus. It's kind of the premier Arts and Humanities lecture on campus as we give it every year. And so we like to say thanks, to Donald's family, for Professor Benson's family, and for the generosity that they have exhibited toward the university over the years. Tonight's lecture will be delivered by Ray Youngbear, and I am really excited to have him here. Ray Youngbear is an extremely distinguished Iowa poet. He was raised on the Meskwaki settlement in central Iowa. He attended College of Pomona in California, as well as the University of Iowa, Grinnell, Northern Iowa, and this very university, Iowa State. He's published a number of books over the years, Winter of the Salamander, The Invisible Musician, The Rock Island Hiking Club, and Manifestation of Wolverine, which I believe is one of the most recent. He's received lots and lots of honors over the years, the American Book Award, fellowships from the NEH. He's taught creative writing at different institutions, including this one, around the country. And he's the co-founder of the Woodland Singers and Dancers. So tonight's presentation is entitled A Literary Experiment with ESP and the Missing Gimmick, or Creativity. So it is my honor to welcome Ray Youngbear to Iowa State University. Thank you.
Deja vu happens when you relive something or thought you relived it. And it's something that has been prevalent in my life ever since I was a young boy. Something that I didn't quite understand other than to have a dream that later foretold I discovered that it was true. And it was unfortunate, a tragedy, that I dreamed a couple of things when I was a young boy and it turned out to be true, and that has made an impact in my life now at 71 years of age to guide me in my work with my writings and so forth. That was my introduction as a very young man to have these two dreams, portents, omens, or whatever you call it, that I thought about for years until I became a teenager, made acquaintances with one of the persons that I dreamt about. The other person I did not know. Nevertheless, in a span of perhaps 15 and 20 years, both were deceased. One I was very close friends with, excuse me. And those are the things that permeate my mind as I'm doing work, because of a 25-year experiment with intuition, gut hunches, excuse me, just wild, just guesses out of the blue regarding people who are either missing or who have been murdered. It's a macabre, somewhat sordid affair. Nevertheless, it was something that pretty much was done out of a proposal many, many years ago. To me, it was felt like 2,000 years ago. But this was just 1995. Were you born in 1995? Anyway, on or about 1995, a friend from college, known as Juan Donner, stopped by to say hello. In his company, as before, was Candy Lott, who was on sabbatical from Oxford via United Kingdom. Like before, when they were younger, they were driving across the country from California. It was summer, 1970, when they first visited the Meskwaki settlement in central Iowa. We had all met years before at the Claremont colleges in Southern California. It should be stated here that Juan is white, as in Caucasian. The only Mexican connections they had was Candy's grandmother, who was reportedly half and Estados Unidos born, United States, which could only be taken as legitimate. In those days, long before pretendians obstructed first language voices, gullibility reigned at those who claimed to be Indian. During orientation week that fall, Juan introduced himself at the Brown House or the Mexican American Center when I was undecided about having a bowl of what appeared to be hamburger, shell pasta, tomatoes and onions, like the kind my mother made back home, often called Rock Island Special, liquefied goulash. It looks good, I said, when Juan asked if I was going to have some. It is, he said, edging closer for a look. Somebody's mother probably drove it in from East LA. After introductions, Juan, who was wearing a Western-type leather coat with fringes and moccasins with small brass bells, said he'd been accepted to Pomona on the basis of 100 books a year he read since quitting high school. It was then I discovered he was truly a rare individual. He was well-versed in archaeology, geology, anthropology, and particularly ethnology of most North American tribes. He mentioned studying the French and Indian War of the 1700s, including the Black Hawk War of the 1830s. Such history was beyond me then, but the names were familiar in having been to Black Hawk State Park in Rock Island, Illinois as a kid. It was no surprise Juan's girlfriend since high school shared similar interests. Despite their hippie dress and demeanor, both were smart and articulate. Moreover, at a time I was undergoing culture shock of college in California, Juan and Candy were angels with whom I trustingly partook of a bowl of menudo, if you know what menudo is. Later, when they invited me to their apartment, it was decorated with Christmas lights on the rails of the steps, and Dionysus was exquisitely painted on the door window. Once inside, Candy was flipping a golden piece of fry bread in the skillet of hot oil, and Juan was outside in the back, heating a small drum by the fire. "What the hell?" I said to a Zuni Indian classmate who had also been invited. He smiled and just nodded, yes. We were then each given mini fry breads in small wooden bowls filled with honey, whereupon we took out the Coors beer, a six-pack, and sat down. Nawab Ashipuben. Yes, Kun Hawabiya. We began dipping the fry bread and relaxing. On the record player, a vinyl LP of Tao's Indian round dance songs was on, sounding immaculate. Candy began talking. "Ray, did Juan tell you his self-given Indian name in Espanol means young bear? Oso joven or joven oso?" His name, translated into English, therefore is John Young Bear. "What the hell?" I said to Paul, the Zuni Indian from New Mexico. That's my grandfather's name. In time, a photograph of my paternal grandfather would be used by Grove Atlantic Publishers as a book cover for Remnants of the First Earth, 1996, my second novel. Thus, through an unannounced visit on a cross-country drive, I was cooking thinly sliced deer backstraps, Chinese style, for them when the subject of ESP was brought up. "That'd be cool, Ray," Juan said, "if you could sit down, close your eyes, and channel the location of some missing persons." "You mean you can do that?" I asked. "Yeah. Well, they are just attempts, but there are TV shows on psychics going into trances and supposedly reliving the crime perpetrated upon a missing or murdered person. In some, there's a substantial reward. We could get rich." We laughed at the bizarre, perhaps morbid prospect, and for the remainder of the night, bullshitted away. A year later or more, a person who had been hired by the family of Roberto Romero, a missing boy from Santa Fe, New Mexico, stopped by and asked for help to see if I could dream the location of said boy. How this person arrived to the point of asking me has since faded with time. But as a tune goes, I was so much younger then than now. I accepted the request by making a tobacco offering with a prayer in Meskwaki at sundown, asking for spiritual assistance before sleep. The person making the dream request was serious. The person being asked to engage in an all but impossible task was apprehensive but hopeful. For the past 25 years, based on a hippie who named himself John Youngbear in Spanish, which was my grandfather's English name, I've sat down on the lazy boy, wall-away recliner, wearing a bandana blindfold, and holding in one hand my late grandmother's jewelry piece. Prayers are recited before the curtains are covered to darken the room. A picture of a missing person is on the computer monitor, and my hand is placed over the screen, barely touching the monitor. Before sitting down on the lazy boy, I wish the person's image traveled through my hand in order to see what isn't there, what can't possibly be seen. Question for Missing People was conducted purely as a literary experiment. As a result, I subsequently discovered such images received could never be attained through the normal creative process of waiting for a poetic inspiration. There's a high risk of developing fossilized poetry, the kind that merely turns brittle and then into fine grains of dust along with you, in the end. From roughly the dozen lazy boy poems composed through these quests, one case stands out above all. The girl Miller case, we shall say, of northern Iowa. Casey Fredrickson may ring a bell with some of you, maybe not, was charged with the girl's murder eventually, but that took years to file. In 2005, roughly, my dates excuse me, but I'm just going to be rough guessing. In 2005, roughly, perhaps a month in July, I was driving with our kids to Marshalltown from the Meskwaki settlement to shop at Walmart when a license plate on a sports type car in front of us by LeGrand, Iowa, the one we were following, caught my attention. I got closer on purpose and was stunned to read and decipher through the dust of the license plates what it said. F-I-N-D-M-E. Earlier that morning, I had seen online or through the Des Moines Register, the 5-year-old girl had been gone for 2 years, minus a person of interest. I focused on the dusty plates and vowed in a whisper that I would try. Indeed. By then, quests had been done on several cases. I know the ESP-related poems I've written, but not the names of the people who were missing. I have to distance myself. I have to try to distance myself, rather. There are 2 shoeboxes of files. One consists of creative drafts, while the other contains newspaper clippings of real-life cases. Jody Husenschur, per suggestion of the spouse of a federal tobacco firearms agent in Cedar Rapids, convinced me also to quest for Jody. Elizabeth Clark, I might get the name wrong, let's just say young lady Clark, smart, whose father I advised his daughter would be found in the hills, not far from Salt Lake City when she was kidnapped. Like most letters sent, no reply from authorities nor the father, Mr. Smart, was received, and none was expected, realistically. Roberto Romero, that little boy out of Santa Fe, New Mexico. This was a missing boy case where an old English professor of mine was my eyes and ears in the Southwest. We will, for today, call him the father of actress Annabeth Gish. We believe the boy was placed in one of the hundreds of old mines at Cerrillos National Park, south of Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's right here. Excuse me. Got my notes mixed up here. Somewhere in New Mexico is a poem I wrote out of this experience. The fish-faced caterpillar, the one we photographed on the trampoline this summer, all radiant with its green, yellow, and black skin colors, has entombed itself in a place called Cerrillos Regional Park. Driving parallel with the railroad tracks, Bob, quote unquote, my professor emeritus observer, and his pet Rio hydroplane Waldo Road in a diabolical truck. To the north, the black volcanic escarpment, and to the south, arroyos. From the pale east, the search party, and to the west, the potential of their discovery. 4 days previous, I described jade speckled flood water flowing into a hollow edifice. A shimmering, watery shaped hand changed into a bear paw, surfacing like a submarine. Soon, Das Boot bellied up, and long amber claws in glowing patina became sprouts situated over a whirlpool. In oblique contact with the swan epiphany, Celine drew a lizard's torso perched on a black sphere. Like us, it was transfixed by the gurgling, rechanneled water. The Romano search party is close, but we're omnipresent, and Bob captures the jagged rocks, blessing grass, pinon, and juniper on film. Annabeth, he must be thinking, which script are you studying now? Did the director of What the Freak call your agent? And would you consider the role of Brooke Grass-Liggins? Bearchild asks. Sign a photo for him on your next visit. He named a daughter after you. He's also the reason I'm here with Rio, drifting sideways over long abandoned mines in a pickup, like a dormant metal detector that becomes animated. Rio is affected by surreal hues of light emanating from the open Colosseum windows in the distance. High above, long gray sheets of rain descend from a thundercloud, covering the valley. Whatever proof that may have been there becomes an echo amid the periodic wailing of trains. Verily, this is a place where mountain lions avoid humanity by draping their shadows over prickly pear and cholla, a place where the scent of corn being ground into meal on a metate no longer drifts over their lightning-lit trails. The boy, unfortunately, was never found. The most interesting situation that developed out of this was a manifestation of a giant bubble in daylight near my home on the Meskwaki settlement on the 700 block of Meskwaki Road. Excuse me. After the person who had visited me asking me to dream the location of this young boy, I was standing by my picture window, kind of south like this, my picture window, second floor, and we live on a hill going down the Meskwaki Road, and there's a long road coming up to this house, and it was on a fall day, I believe, and it was very windy. It was coming from the northwest, coming across, when I noticed something sparkling coming up the driveway. I thought it was a car there first, but I thought, there's no silver cars on the settlement. Very, very luminescent, odd shape. And then after it came out, I freaked out. It was a bubble, huge, about maybe this size, at least this about this size right here. And as it came out of the thickets, it was kind of like wavering. Very much like the Wizard of Oz movie, you know, the Good Witch coming down, the whole scenario. Only this was real life with me. And so I stood there at the picture window, and it came all the way up, defined crosswinds, and then it went down and disappeared. By then it was too late for me to grab my camera because I was stunned and, you know, they just overwhelmed. And so that pretty much set into pace what would be a very interesting journey trying to uncover various cases. And I've done quite a few, and it's made for interesting fodder. Fodder is kind of like a gold mine of material. I send premonitions off, almost like the Bureau of Premonitions, to authorities in Iowa. I've sent stuff off to the security department here in Ames a couple of years ago when you had a young man was found in a building not too far from here. I can't remember his name. He's from Gwinnett, Iowa.
It's John.
Is that, what?
John.
John, what was his last name? Lavina?
Lucina.
Lavina?
Lucina.
Okay.
Yeah.
I questioned with John, and that was, to me, close. The only thing I needed then was an interpreter, very much like what an actress Annette Bening says in one movie. I need an interpreter, quote unquote. The materials that were provided to the Ames Police Department and Security Department on campus did outline those things, retracing John's steps here on campus. I was saying eventually, if I only knew what the street names were, if somebody was able to decipher what my messages were, they would have found him eventually. What was most odd about that time was as I was questioned, I was holding my grandmother's jewelry piece, and I held it so tight that when I let go, that pin was sticking to my palm. And one of the things that the authorities discovered with John was that when he fell, what happened?
He froze to death.
He bled to death.
Yeah.
And that scared me. But those are the things that it's an experiment. But I tend to think out of 1,000 attempts, a fraction of 1% might seep through. But what is that? Is that a real thing? Is that a real divination? Or is it just basically the hippocampus going 1,000 miles an hour, filtering, deciphering a lifelong system of learning, of places, times, names, what, where, when, why, how, all of that stuff accumulates, very much like that last moment of life. It's been documented that when a person dies, you do undergo that last flashback of memory. And it's pretty much the same thing that you go through with questioning, because you're trying to take a peek into somebody that is no longer around and so forth. But those are the things that I go through. I'm going to close. Oh, maybe we should watch that video, and then that's even better. I made a movie not too long ago. U42 out of Atlanta, Georgia, an independent film company contacted me based off the poem, The Three Brothers, 1999. I was lecturing here at Iowa State University in the spring 1999. 3 hitchhikers at Yosemite went missing. I went home, had walleye supper with Rolling Rock beer, sat down on a lazy boy, crashed out after a 3-hour lecture, and I dreamt of a license plate of those ladies that were missing and eventually murdered. Eventually, there was a naturalist that was eventually beheaded also, but by the time this case got done, 4 women were dead. It's an extraordinary case of how not to trust a hotel handyman. So, extraordinary things to learn. Gullibility in traveling, for one. A simple knock on the door. May I change or something in the bathroom? That forever changed the lives of this family. Can we turn that sound up a little
Poems, in English, Shen Apayako in and Noe, Pequimonan Nishka, poetry, in Jahini Nikanotaman Moninegud, Ashaway, Apayania, Ashitahan Kandaman, Ashaiku in Monisuajua, Nes Metusania, Penus Yamaha, Das Monisuchikio Inina. Injahini mani bekwe moni tas tanado taman inja. In no way am I saying I am gifted with ESP. That's not the case. However, I do believe it's possible for someone with non-ordinary insight to see what may have happened to people who became victims of crime. We believe some people can see what others can't. Our word is Nahabihak. it's emotionally draining. You're trying to figure out the impossible, and you get drained anyway, and there's always a fear that you're going to accidentally trigger something that you don't want. On or about February 1999, after giving a university lecture, I came home to a supper of walleye fillets, fried potatoes with onions, and cold beer. After thanking Stella for the meal, I sat down on the lazy boy to watch TV. The last thing I recall before dozing off was news about missing sightseers at Yosemite National Park.
We feel almost certain that the women were the victims of a violent crime. We're now focusing on one theory that we believe to be the most likely scenario. The scenario includes a violent crime occurring at or near Cedar Lodge.
In my Meskwaki upbringing, under the tutelage of my great-grandmother, I was taught non-ordinary manifestations like dreams and other daily interactions with nature and wildlife might be signs. This stems from animism, a belief held by most tribal societies that trees, rocks, and other things have feelings and are able to communicate.
It's going to make a great big hole in our lives of all our family.
We don't have a point last seen, and the search area is so large. There's very little clues. Footprints are small. We just have a red car.
So, mostly from guilt, I initiated a session with the lazy boy. When the lazy boy recliner helps, numbers and letters appear under a Dutch bandana blindfold. Some taking the shape of hovering fireflies, Wasasiha, who paint scenes of faraway places. The chair became my late grandmother's soft arms. The TV news report on the missing sightseers appeared. The missing mother who was in the car with two girls developing. Words were exchanged with two dark, haggard-looking men. The license plate number of the Nissan Sentra was lost. From under a bandana, I whispered a prayer in Black Eagle Child, hoping for the elusive license plate. On the third visitation, there were three motionless torsos, floating inches above an unseen ground. On the paper nearby, I wrote, 3 hills, 3 peaks. Further inquiry brought a Ruger 22 caliber pistol, followed by EAM. EAM. I wondered, are these connected to Yosemite? The fourth revelation wasn't encouraging. I invited a luminescent picture self-assembled. Had it not been for the fourth murder of another female, I may not have written. This is a letter from July 23, 1999 that was addressed to Mr. James Maddock of the FBI. It basically outlines the quest process from the lazy boy, the nap that I had. And so by April 28th, only then did I understand that EAM was connected to Carrie Stayner's license plate. And I found out that those three bumps turned out to be the Three Brothers formation at Yosemite. National Park. If it's a wasted effort in trying to contact authorities, no big deal. I think the thing that drives me is that it's eventually literature.
We have developed specific information linking Stainer to the Sun Peloso murders.
I know what he did. I know all the details because I've been briefed by the FBI, and it's terrible. And I'm prepared to see to the end.
It's been 20 years since the murders of the 4 females at Yosemite National Park. Most of the quest images chronicled then are now part of a fiction manuscript called The Chair Shall Conduct All Meetings. Unlike people who relive lethal attacks, mine dealt with names, numbers, and geomarkers. But whenever that failed, overt things happened, like physical contact with cool drops of water or forks levitated for attention. It can also be complicated, like some ghost asking a personal question: do you find me attractive? A photograph speaks time-jumping language. It's important to make others aware of what's happening. Eventually, what happens in Indian country also happens elsewhere.
I want to conclude with one paragraph. March 6, 2015, to Black Hawk County Sheriff, Polk County Sheriff, West Des Moines Police Department, Franklin County Sheriff, and Floyd County Sheriff, DCI, CC, Iowa, and YB file. Regarding Evelyn Miller, the girl, hunches or coincidence? Please, if I may have a moment of your time. Since 2007, beginning with the Evelyn Miller case, I've submitted hunches to Iowa authorities on several cold cases. The agencies above were contacted regarding Ashley Oakland, Ethan Kazmerzak, and the Evansdale girls. My intent today is to share some thoughts. In so doing, I pray no one is offended. But if I have misspoken, then you have my sincerest apologies. Plus, in having lost my elderly father last year to an accidental fire, and being in grief with my wife over the murder of her brother and wife last February, I wish not to be insensitive nor callous. 2 years after Evelyn Miller was victimized in 2005, experimental intuition-based quests were conducted at home. See enclosures. These images were sent to investigating agencies, including the girls' grandparents. However, it's unknown whether the latter received them from church per request. Basically, with the Casey Fredrickson trial in progress, new details have surfaced whereby I'm inclined to believe the hunches provided on the abduction and murder of the girl were, in part, remarkably close. This isn't to say they were accurate, yet it's something worth pondering with open minds. In 2012, when the medical examiner's report on the girl was publicly disclosed, I realized the hunches on girls' injuries injuries as submitted in 2007 matched the autopsy report. While the images underlined hereunder were posed as questions, as is often the method, number 2 through number 4 nevertheless alluded to the neck area and arms of the girl. For image number 3, this might be apartment number 4, where a girl's family lived, whereas image number 1 could be a night scope or an icon on a hard drive disk, things collected in search warrants but deemed insignificant. Thus, the Meskwaki settlement, 202 Red Earth Drive 8 years ago, July 9, 2009, 1, an image of a circle that resembles a telescopic sight on a rifle. Only the light is infrared light. Crosshairs are far to the side, so much so that it'd be hard to aim and find a target if this is in fact what it was. Hand-drawn illustration in left margin. 2, an image of a man twisting a child's neck, violent enough to kill. 3, an image of a half circle of darts, horizontal and positioned like sun rays. This may be a spin-off from the previous syringe-like images via, quote, conveyor belt or military tank tread via July 5, 07 images. With my wife's mysterious puncture on her neck, was Evelyn impaled or shot with syringe-like devices? Illustration in left margin. 4, an image of a Greek-like statue of a man without arms or head. Was Evelyn impacted on the neck with 2 broken arms? An image of number 4. And it goes on, but that gives you an idea of the type of work that I've been doing for 25 years. Interesting, scary, I wouldn't do it again. Once was enough, but the Evelyn Miller case kind of shut that door on that because, as I'm saying in the movie, you don't want to trigger something that you don't want. Because of these so many people have died. It's like going into the library, I get spooked out in the library. Why? Because so many authors are not around anymore who wrote that stuff. And it's their words. And you're in it, right in the middle. All of this buzzing around. It's just a matter of trying to catch it. That's what intuition is. I think the scientists are finally getting the idea of what Native Americans have been harping about all these years, that we are suspicious, and rightly so. Because there are things in this air floating in this room right now that are in need of attention. Whether it's by you, by me, by us, by somebody, no one knows. We live with them daily. Your grandparents, your parents, if they are gone, are with you. You may not know it. You haven't been taught that. You've been taught to detach yourself from someone that dies. On my end, we haven't been taught to detach ourselves. We've been taught to respect them. We cannot utter their name in Meskwaki for fear of triggering a visit, for fear of agonizing them in the hereafter. So those things are the ones that are things I consider. It's a very delicate trail that we walk throughout life. And my advice to you is, when you hear numbers and letters, and you hear an animal singing beside you, or a bird, take special note. It's for you. Something is being communicated to you. You may not understand it, but because you haven't been taught that, you ignore it. You haven't been taught animism. Animism is the key to understanding all of life on earth. You go to a tree outside. To you, it's a tree. It grows, provides oxygen. To me, it's a tree that has life, very much like the Wizard of Oz. How dare you pick this tree? Those are the things that Meskwakis believe in implicitly. If you could take away 1% of that tonight, that'd be nice. Don't be so cold. Don't be so, closed-minded. Because eventually, everything will unravel. And we're getting to that point soon. I hope the scientists can figure out what this UFO is? Because I'm dying to know. You know, I've seen them 5 times. They've been close enough as the far room, 30 feet. My wife and I were chased by one. We did a battle, all-out battle with one. You know what they did? They took our 22 bullets, converted them into energy, and used it to propel their space vehicles. Just think, the United States thinks there's an incursion, they shoot a rocket, what's gonna happen? It's gonna reverse. There are things that we're gonna learn from these UFOs. I think A.V. Loeb, Harvard astronomer, says it best. It will be like God. I bid you farewell.